What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Night Shift. I'm your host, as always, Zach Hernandez, and today I got Owen back on the show for, the fifth or sixth time. I don't know. I
Something
should
like
have
that.
counted.
Something like that.
Man, it's been a lot of times you've been on here. I think you got the record so far. You're a good guy to have the record, man, because you always bring the heat, you always bring the fire, and we have some good conversation. Thanks for coming on, dude.
Yes, sir. Thank you, brother. What's up, boys? Good to be back.
Yeah, man, it's always a blast on here. We got a couple things we want to talk about today. Obviously, we got the Super Bowl right around the corner. That's going to be a huge point of conversation today. And we got a couple other things on the agenda. Owen, glad to have you back. And we're going to jump right into this. And the first thing that we're going to cover today are the NFL awards, which happened last night. The NFL honors, they had the ceremony and they gave out all the awards: MVP, Comeback Player of the Year, all those awards. And me and Owen are going to sit here and discuss how accurate we think they were, who we think should have won each one, and if we think the NFL got it right with their voting system. So we'll jump right into it. And the first one that I kind of want to discuss here could be a controversial one is Comeback Player of the Year. So Comeback Player of the Year went to Joe Flacco. He beat out Damar Hamlin by 11 points. And Damar Hamlin actually had more first place votes. But since Joe Flacco had more second and third place votes combined, because every time you vote for like first place, second, they each have a designated number. Then you add them all up. And Joe Flacco beat out Damar Hamlin because he got a lot more second and third place votes. So Joe Flacco's the comeback player of the year. And I want to see your opinion on that. How do you feel about Joe Flacco beating out Damar Hamlin?
Not mad at that one bit. Me personally, I would have loved to see Baker, even though I know he had no shot because of the storyline that Joe Flacco had, and also the fact that Damar Hamlin coming off the injury that he had, even though he played like I think 2 games or whatever it was, and everybody was calling for him to he shouldn't even be in the debate, which I understand. But wasn't mad at all with Joe Flacco. I think that he had a phenomenal season for where he was at, where he came back from, comeback player of the year. But I think it went to the right person. They didn't miss out on that. I was going to be really mad, in my opinion, if Damar won it, just because of how well Baker played and how well Joe played as well. So not mad at all. I think that they did their job with this one. But the fact that he got more first place votes just kind of shows that it's a slippery slope with these awards, and which we can get into later with other awards that were given out.
Yeah, and I kind of lean the same way, dude, because I would have been kind of annoyed if Damar Hamlin won it. Now, granted, obviously he had a pretty crazy just comeback in his life, being pretty much, dying on the field and then coming back and actually playing a couple of snaps, which is crazy in itself. But I mean, if we look at it just factually and statistically here, Joe Flacco was way more of a comeback player that actually was a contributor to his team, right? That's not taking anything away from
100%.
Damar Hamlin's story, but let's be honest here. He didn't really deserve the award of comeback player of the year. I think that was all Joe Flacco with coming off the couch pretty much. I mean, just being some old guy who was a backup with the Jets and wasn't very good. He came back and got a job with the Browns after they lost Deshaun Watson early on in the season. And he came back and then he ends up winning lots of games towards the end and plays really well. Looks like prime Flacco and brings them to the playoffs. Obviously lost to the Texans in the first round, but Joe Flacco played pretty well for being that guy to come off the couch after being the guy who really was not good as a backup again on the Jets. So I think Joe Flacco totally deserved the comeback player of the year. He was if I had a vote, which hopefully at some point in my life I would have voted Joe Flacco for that one. Definitely.
With that, there's nothing wrong with any of those takes right there. The only thing is when I look at the true comeback player of the year, I would have now see with my vote, it would have 100% went to Baker, and I wouldn't have thought twice about it. Easy second place would have been Joe Flacco. It's not even close. Easily. But I just think when you go year by year, Baker played the full year. He brought his team to the playoffs. Mm-hmm. They did what they did. You know what I mean? But nothing that he didn't take anything away from them in the big games, in my opinion. I think that he played his heart out. I think they'll be back. But I think all in all, it was okay that Joe won that. Wasn't mad at all. I mean, for who was going to get at those top two, I knew Baker didn't have a chance, but my vote would have gone Baker.
I don't hate the Baker one either. I think Baker had a good shot. It's funny because now Baker's looking like he might snag a pretty big contract from Tampa. Like, it looks like Baker's kind of back as a pretty solid, solidified quarterback, as he was playing pretty well for Tampa this year. And I wouldn't have hated a Baker Mayfield win, but I definitely would have gone Joe Flacco over Baker Mayfield. I just think the idea of being that like 40-year-old guy coming off a pretty much being terrible, and then leading the Browns to the playoffs, like coming in the second half of the season when every game is crucial and every single game matters. I liked the Joe Flacco pick. Baker would have been my number 2. And if I'm being completely honest here, I totally thought it was going to go to Damar Hamlin. Like, with the narratives that the NFL pushes and the NFL writes, I totally thought Damar Hamlin was going to be the guy to bring home Comeback Player of the Year, just because, everyone's going crazy about Damar Hamlin came back to life. He died on the field, this and that. And I thought 100% it was going to be Damar Hamlin. So I was kind of surprised to see it was Joe Flacco.
Well, I mean, if I'm being honest, I was definitely happy when I saw that pop up on the NFL on the IGs, but I was like, okay, like I said for the third time, that they did it, they got it right. I wouldn't have been surprised though, too, like what you were saying, or even though you were surprised because with all the hype that he was getting, I definitely would have been mad, like you were saying. But I mean,
yeah,
it's good that they got it to the right guy.
Yep, agreed. All right, let's move on to another award. The Offensive Player of the Year went to Christian McCaffrey. I think Tyreek Hill was number 2. I actually didn't see who was number 2 because I think McCaffrey won it pretty easily. I would imagine it was Tyreek Hill. But for me, my vote would have totally gone to McCaffrey. I think they got it right.
100%, extremely well deserved. I think it would have been maybe like week 7, 8. I think everybody who was watching the game thought that, Tyreek was running away with it, just with the yards that he was getting and how he was leading the league in touchdowns, receiving yards by, at least 2 or 3 games, just with him and Tua being the number 1 target. But Christian just kept on doing his thing. He was breaking records. It's the touchdowns, of course. You know what I mean? He had a great year running. That's not why he got it. He got it for the consecutive games with his touchdowns, the multi-touchdowns games, the leading the yards in scrimmage, leading the league in total touchdowns. And 100%, it should have been, that's a unanimous pick right there. You're not mad at that at all. It completely deserves. But Tyreek, kind of the same thing with, would have been my clear second as Joe Flacco with my vote with Baker. He would have been a clear second with Tyreek. I think that he balled out. And then a close third, or kind of getting at Tyreek, would have been CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb absolutely balled out. And you love to see that. And he's getting into those years, man. When you see these receivers, when they start blowing up in their first 3-4 years, this is the time where now CeeDee is going to have another year where he goes and he gets 1,400, 80 plus receptions and 11 tutties. You know what I mean? He's just going to stack these years up. Same with Tyreek, even though I know he might be retiring soon. But yeah, very, very happy for Christian. I mean, he led the league with running backs, with receiving, reception, receiving yards. Yeah, he balled out,
He did ball out. And so, yeah, I think it was totally deserved as well. I mean, you pretty much hit on every single point that I would have said. Christian McCaffrey led the league amongst running backs in pretty much everything. He was scoring almost a touchdown a game. It seemed like every game, it was like he was just going to get you a touchdown. He was like the most anytime touchdown lock of like the history of the NFL. So Christian McCaffrey, I think that was totally well-deserved. Not much more to say about that. I did want to touch a little bit, though, on your CeeDee Lamb take, which I totally love. I think CeeDee Lamb has emerged as the second best wide receiver in the NFL right now, behind Tyreek Hill. I think Tyreek Hill keeps that nod. I just think he might be, just as a player behind Mahomes, the most valuable player in the NFL, and McCaffrey's up there too. But just the speed that Tyreek Hill has, the strength he has, all of his skills throughout being a wide receiver in every way, Tyreek Hill is so great. But CeeDee Lamb, I think, is right there, number 2. He's totally emerged as such a superstar wide receiver. Helped me win my fantasy championship this year, so shout out CeeDee Lamb for that. And yeah, I'm big on CD Lamb right now, dude. So I like how you brought that up.
Yeah, thank you. I was horrific in fantasy this year. That wasn't the high point. But let's look at why CD was doing his thing. Don't get me wrong. CD Lamb has been established now for the past 3 years,
Hmm.
100% since he came
Hmm.
in the league. But
Hmm.
also, Dak motherfucking Prescott, dude. He had a great year. Dude, he was
Yeah.
the MVP front runner for weeks and weeks. And I was saying that as a diehard Niner fan.
Hmm.
Now, why was Dak having a great year too? Of course, because CD. It goes hand in hand, just like how Tua was going off in yards. You look at who he had. He had Tyreek, same with Purdy and all of his weapons, whatever. But
Hmm.
I mean, a huge reason why CD had the year he had was because of the guy thrown to him.
Hmm.
And if those guys, if they still stick with Dak, which I know they probably will for some weird reason, I think CD's going to keep on stacking up these yards. He's easily going to get over 10,000 career. He
Hmm.
has a huge shot, future Hall of Famer. I just think with these numbers that he's able to pile up on his pro reference, I think he has a chance,
Hmm.
to get up there because Tyreek's already there. He could retire tomorrow and be all day long. He'd get the jacket.
Definitely. And I think Dak Dak kind of started a little slow. And then he really picked it up towards the middle of the season, and he was playing like the best quarterback in the NFL for a
Well,
while. I mean,
he was
yeah.
for weeks and weeks and weeks. He was the MVP, and it wasn't even close in my opinion. Now that was like week 10, so I knew
Hmm.
that it wasn't. I knew he wasn't going to run away with it just because it's extremely rare in my opinion.
Hmm.
Um, but then yeah, I think I forget what game it was, and then he just fell off. He fell off. Really, the face of the MVP conversation. I can't remember what game it was, but the entire internet was like, "Yeah, there goes that MVP." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There goes that talk.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he flat out balled out, which I love to see, man. I'm not a Dak Prescott hater. I might have said things in the past because he's a Cowboy, but I mean, he had the
Yeah.
best year of his freaking life, dude.
You're right. No, he did. Shout out to Dak Prescott. He had a great, I mean, towards the end, he got a little shaky again.
Yeah,
But that's kind of who Dak is. I don't know if he's ever going to stay fully consistent throughout an entire season, but he'll look like an MVP for a couple of weeks there.
yeah.
He's done that. So shout out to Dak. Okay, let's move on. We'll hit Defensive Rookie of the Year. That went to Will Anderson Jr. on the Texans, and I just think that's another one that's just perfect. I mean, I think
There
they
you
got
go.
it
Yep.
right. Can't really argue with that. Will Anderson had a great year. I mean, all the Texans rookies, I mean, seemed like they had amazing years, and we'll move on to the next one right after this. But yeah, not much to add about Will Anderson Jr. Just a phenomenal season from a rookie.
There you go. Exactly. There's really nothing. I mean, he was a huge factor, if not the biggest factor in that run game. And to do that as a rookie, I know he had an extreme amount of hype and he lived up to it. So, but yeah, there really isn't much to say on that. It's
Hmm.
kind of like Christian McCaffrey. Even though it
Hmm.
wasn't like, oh my gosh, it's by far with Junior as was with McCaffrey. I just think that, it was a pretty easy pick for those guys. He
Yeah,
did what he had to do.
agreed. All right, we'll hit the next Texans rookie who took home an award. CJ Stroud won Offensive Rookie of the Year. And this one could be a little controversial. I could see a lot of people wanting Puka Nacua to take home the honor or CJ Stroud. It was obviously one of the two. And it ended up going to CJ Stroud, and Stroud would have definitely had my vote. And that's not taking anything away from Puka because Puka he broke all sorts of rookie receiving records.
Yeah.
I think he broke the receptions record, and I think he broke the yards record for rookie wide receivers. But CJ Stroud came into a team as a second overall pick after a Texans team who wasn't good last year, and absolutely he was a leader, and he was so good. I mean, he broke the record for most yards in a game from a rookie quarterback. I mean, he was breaking quarterback rookie records all over the place as well. And just to be as vocal and as great of a leader as he was, and then lead this offense to be one of the better offenses in the league, and then lead them to a playoff win.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on, dude. I mean,
Yeah.
CJ Stroud, I think that was his award for sure.
100%. I mean, this one is easily actually. I mean, no, this one isn't the biggest debate because I know we're coming up on Defensive Player of the Year, but I could 100% see what you're saying. How there would be backlash with this, with how Puka absolutely balled out too. But when you look at it, I mean, the hardest position in the league is quarterback, and to do it as a rookie, to do it with pretty much a brand new team full of rookies that made it look like they've been together for 3-4 years. It's just you don't see that doesn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
especially not with that kind of organization. Now they have a phenomenal head coach. He's going to sign a 10-year. You know what I mean? That's going to be their guy. But I just think exactly what you were saying, man. It's just that he was able to come in and be a vet like that. I mean, he was in MVP conversation too for the first 8 weeks. You know what I mean? And it was justified. I knew I called you up and I'm like, dude, why are these guys talking about Stroud being MVP? How are we doing this? Because he went 7 games without throwing a pick and this and that. But then you look at how he's able to control his team as a rookie in the hardest position in the league, if not all of sports. I mean, that's a huge take, but you could justify that.
Yeah,
but I think 100% he would have had my vote. Another one that out of the couple that they got right.
I think it's extremely valid to say that CJ Stroud has emerged as a top 5 quarterback in the league right now.
Oh, yeah, 100% after that season. I mean, yeah, you can't not. But also, this was one of the weirdest quarterback years of all time. Weirdest because nobody balled out. I mean, nobody – usually with these quarterback years, it's someone who kind of runs away with touchdowns, runs away with completions, runs away with yards, you know what I mean, and passer rating, which there was a little bit of that. But this was one of those years where almost anybody could go up and grab it, and he definitely put himself up there. He's easily 5 or 4.
Agreed. I gotta agree with that. CJ Stroud is the future of the NFL, and he's become one of my favorite players too. How vocal he is too about his faith. I think that's so cool, and he's kind of leading the way for a lot of other guys who I see doing the same thing. I think that's really cool for Stroud. So, offensive rookie of the year, CJ Stroud. Let's move on to defensive player of the year. And I've been seeing a lot of takes on Twitter, who people think should have won, and it ended up going to Myles Garrett, but a lot of people are on the TJ Watt train. I've seen some people on the Max Crosby train as well. Where are you leaning?
I mean, 100%. I mean, it's 100%. I got to lean towards TJ just because of how he kind of built that defense. They built it around him. I mean, he absolutely had another baller year. I know what he was coming off of, wasn't the luckiest for him, but he came out and he got 19. He beat Myles Garrett, and I'm almost positive every single positive stat. I understand Max Crosby 100%. Watching that guy on the TV, he's insane. He's on every play. He's involved in everything. So I understand that he's going to get the nod one of these years. But I just think I kind of don't know where it came from with Myles Garrett. Maybe the fact that defense was easily top 5 the whole year, if not top 3 for some of the weeks, 100%. And I know he's a huge driving force of that, the biggest on that defense. But I just think when TJ Watt, has, 5 more sacks, way more QB hits, an interception. They have the same amount of forced fumbles, but he has 3 recovered. I mean, he just has more pressures, more tackles for loss. It's just it's a weird one. I'm not a huge fan of it, but what I do like is that Myles Garrett is an absolute future Hall of Famer. You look at the years he's had, what he's stacked up. So I'm not extremely mad that it went to him, because he is 100% deserving of an accolade like this. Maybe not this year versus TJ Watt, but the career that he's put up, I'm not mad at it at all. Nowhere near as mad as I was at Aaron Jones getting 3 when he snubbed, I forget his name, but Aaron Donald had 1 defensive player of the year caliber year, and he got pure it was just a bias, but that's a whole different thing with Donald, bro. Even though he's a monster, future Hall of Famer too, I just think I'm not mad at it. Not mad, but it is a little bit weird. When those go to those guys.
It's a tough one. I think all 3 of these guys, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, all had seasons deserving of a Defensive Player of the Year award. I mean, they were all so valuable and so good for their defenses, but I would have to lean TJ Watt as well. And I know it's tough because defensive linemen, it's a lot more than the stats show. And I think they're putting a lot of pressure on the guys, and they're opening up holes for other guys to get to the quarterback. It's a lot more than just how many sacks did he have, right? However, when you do look at the stats, I mean, TJ Watt, like you brought up, TJ Watt pretty much gets him in every single way. He had,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 5 more sacks than Myles Garrett this season. Had
Yeah,
the interception.
1914, I think.
Yeah, 1914. I think that's what it
Yeah.
was. TJ Watt led the league in sacks. I just had to lean TJ Watt as well. But like you brought up, I don't think it's, it's not that Myles Garrett didn't have a good season and isn't deserving of a defensive player of the year. It was kind of like Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic the other year going for MVP. It's like these guys are both having MVP type seasons, but you can only give it to one of them. Although maybe not to that extent, because I don't know how, it's not an MVP. I don't know if it's really to that extent with Myles Garrett, but same kind of concept. I just think they're both so good, but I think I would lean TJ Watt as well, just because he does wash him in all the statistical categories. And it's really tough to argue with that and
Yeah.
come up with a reason why Myles Garrett deserves it more than TJ Watt.
Right. So. And I think you make a phenomenal point is that it isn't just about stats. 100%. It's like you were saying, the opportunities they make for the other guys to get through, to get to these holes, to get to the quarterback, get to certain spots they need to be on defense to execute and stop the offense. I 100% get that. But it's the weird part is that that's 100% true. But then when you, like we were just saying, when you look at the numbers about how TJ separates himself by what people have to realize, 5 sacks is a bare minimum of 3 games. Don't get me wrong. Myles Garrett can get 5 a game. I understand that, even though that'd be insane. I'm not saying he can't do that, but realistically speaking, he clears the number 1 guy who got the award by 3 to 4 games in multiple stats. So that's the only part where it's just not that it's not that great when you give the nod to the other guy. Like I said, I'm not mad because it's Myles Garrett. He's deserving. But it's just when you clear a guy and you're number 2 and you clear the number 1 in a bunch of different stats that are kind of how you get paid in that position, it is definitely annoying, 100%.
Got it. Totally agree with you. All right, let's move on to our second to last award. Coach of the Year went to Kevin Stefanski of the Cleveland Browns, and he just beat out DeMeco Ryans, they had the same amount of points, but to break the tiebreaker, Kevin Stefanski had 1 more first place vote than DeMeco Ryans, and that's what got him the Coach of the Year nod. So for me, I'd have given this to DeMeco Ryans. DeMeco Ryans was my pick for Coach of the Year this season. And I understand the Kevin Stefanski pick, leading the Browns to the Super Bowl, leading the Browns to the playoffs, losing Nick Chubb week 2, losing your starting quarterback when did Deshaun go out? Week 6 or something like that. I mean, Deshaun was out, I think, I played a couple of games in the beginning. And I understand that, but for me, I'm looking at DeMeco Ryans, who's coming in as a rookie head coach with a rookie quarterback, with a team that was not good last year, leads them to a really, really good season, beats Kevin Stefanski in the playoffs, leads them to a playoff win. I mean, I know you're not supposed to take playoffs into consideration, but we look at this so far after, it's hard not to. But regardless of that, I just think that with the situation of DeMeco Ryans being a rookie head coach with a rookie quarterback coming onto a team that wasn't good. I mean, we didn't expect the Texans to be a playoff team at all. We didn't expect the Texans to take as big of a leap as they did, and they did. And I think DeMeco Ryans was such a massive part of that. So I'd have given this award to DeMeco Ryans.
100%. I got the same thing as you. It was getting towards, when they were, I think Houston was like 7-5 or something like that, where you're at that point now. That's way past mid-year, but you're expecting them to win now because of the culture that those guys created. That coach, that coach and that coaching staff, the QB, the defense, everything that those guys created in that locker room. 100% coming into the year with the new head coach, new quarterback, new everybody, pretty much. Weren't expecting these guys really to be even close, really not even to break 500. And they just completely blew everybody out of the water. So that's those times where it's like, okay, that's a coach of the year. He's a rookie. He's coming in with a rookie quarterback. He's doing all these things. But to get to Stefanski, he is, I mean, good for him. You know what I mean? And there's not a lot of coaches that would be able to do that. Like you're saying, you lose arguably or top 3 running back in the league without a doubt. I mean, one of the hardest runners. And then you lose your quarterback who you guys paid, $250 million. And then you're switching out quarterbacks. You're doing this, you're doing that. and you're able to still get to the playoffs. So I'm really not mad at that, but I would have 100% loved to see it go to, D'Amico, 100%.
Agree with all of that. Great points. I'm with you on that. Let's hit the final award, the most important award, the most
Yikes.
valuable player. And
Yikes.
that ends up going to Lamar Jackson, who had 49 out of the 50 first place votes. The only guy to receive the other first place vote was Josh Allen, which kind of caught me by surprise. But Lamar Jackson almost had his second unanimous MVP. He'd be the only person to have 2 unanimous MVPs in the history of the NFL. But Lamar Jackson is the MVP for this season, man. The biggest award of the year. I guess maybe not Super Bowl MVP. How are we feeling about Lamar Jackson taking it home?
I mean, whoever voted for Josh Allen saved the NFL, in my opinion, because, I mean, even though Josh Allen didn't deserve that first place vote. Let me just start off by saying this, is that I think when you look at it, 100% that Lamar Jackson deserved to be MVP. He was the most valuable player. I understand that. Stats wise, no way in hell. Okay. I'm not saying that. I think that what he did with his wide receivers and that team, even though he had an absolutely stacked defense, which is what you kind of need that to really be to continue the success. And he's had a defense almost since he came into the league, if not every year. But I was mad about it for sure weeks and weeks and weeks ago when he didn't lead the league in anything besides rushing yards for quarterback, which is huge. He's easily the best mobile quarterback. He is the best running playmaking quarterback, if not the best playmaking quarterback, just what he can do with his legs, 100%. We saw that against us on Christmas Day. But the only thing is just I'm a huge pro reference guy, and in 2 years and 3 years when I'm looking at his stats and I see his stat line and it reads MVP, I'm just not going to be too happy about it, just because, I mean, he really didn't have a great year, stat sheet wise. I get it. It's not about the stats. But I mean, it's a really, really, really weird MVP year because, like we were talking about, there's no quarterback that separated himself. Lamar did not separate himself whatsoever. I mean, he did what he had to do. He got his team wins. I understand that. But it was also like, if we're talking about, like, if it's most valuable player, I get it, Lamar. But in this year, it's kind of the etch too to CJ Stroud for if you take him out of that. If you take him out of that team and you take Lamar out of that team, what's happening? Lamar, if you take, the Ravens' #1 defense, they proved that versus us. And then you do the same thing with CJ Stroud and you take him out of Houston. I think Houston's going to be way more in a hole than the Ravens. That's all I'm saying. Let me say it again. Deserving of the MVP. Oh, a pretty bad MVP year, in my opinion, even though McCaffrey went off and Lamar, I understand it, whatever. Allen, he shouldn't have even really been in the talk. But I know I'm going all over the place. He deserved it. Good for him. But I just think it was a weird one.
It is a weird one. It's always tough. And for me, my pick probably would have been Christian McCaffrey. And I know that they don't. It's just never going to go to a running back again. Like, that's just the way the league's going. The MVP is strictly quarterback award. So when you're a running back like Christian McCaffrey, you're going to have to hope for the offensive player of the year. But I probably would have gone with Christian McCaffrey for the sole fact that none of the quarterbacks separated themselves like we have seen in past seasons, right? Like Aaron Rodgers was separating himself when he was winning his MVPs. Patrick Mahomes was separating himself when he won his. Lamar Jackson in 2019 separated himself when he won his, right? Or 2019, I think it was. Yeah. So I think this would have been the year for a non-quarterback to win the award. Maybe if Tyreek Hill didn't get injured and kind of kept up the same pace as he was in the beginning of the year, he probably could have had a decent shot, but I probably would have gone Christian McCaffrey. And I know I put out an episode a while ago right after the Christmas Day game because I was just pointing out how the race was between, at that point on Christmas night, the race was between Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson. It was
100%.
those two guys. Everyone had those two as top two. So it really was going to come down. I felt it was just going to come down to who had the better game. And if someone had a stinker, the other guy's going to win the MVP. And Brock Purdy threw 4 interceptions. Granted, I wouldn't say all 4 of them were his fault. Probably 2 of them were. But he didn't have a good game, and he got crushed. And Lamar Jackson, he didn't have some ridiculously fantastic game, but he completely
definitely
outplayed.
had a good game. Yeah, 100%.
Definitely had a good game, and he outplayed Brock Purdy, and that was all that mattered for that. So I think I don't hate the award going to Lamar Jackson just because it's like you said. I mean, it's tough to pinpoint a guy who really was the guy who fully deserved it. I mean, it could have gone a lot of different directions. So I don't know. The Josh Allen first place vote was a little janky to me. I thought I saw that Lamar Jackson had 49, and I thought, oh my gosh, somebody either gave it to Brock or gave it to McCaffrey, but someone gave Josh Allen.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not surprised with these voters. But I mean, but here's the thing with going back to the number 1 guy and the number 2 is that why I'm also not as mad as I was weeks and weeks and weeks ago, because I mean, week 14 came around and I was like, okay, or week 15. And I was like, okay, Lamar has it locked as long as he doesn't throw 10 picks to 2 tutties. You know what I mean? Just because it's the quarterback, and McCaffrey was doing his thing still, but McCaffrey wasn't like insanity in yards. He wasn't going to maybe get 18 or 19, of course. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If he got that number, they would have gave it to him, in my opinion, because that's just insane with the touchdowns, with the scrimmage yards, with the receptions, all that. But when you look at 1 and 2 guy who should have got it, Lamar and McCaffrey, I 100% give the edge to Lamar, in my opinion, because if you take, it's the same thing. Most valuable player, biggest thing when I determine it is if you take that guy off that team, what's happening with that team. You take Christian McCaffrey off the 49ers, 100% the 49ers are still a playoff team. Super Bowl, you never know. Just because it'd be pretty disrespectful after what McCaffrey did to say, oh yeah, we're still easily in the Super Bowl without McCaffrey after he had a record-breaking year. You know what I mean? But that's also why I'm not too mad about it going to Lamar, because when you look at that 1 and 2, he has that edge, in my opinion.
That's valid as well. He has that edge in that regard, but also when you start to look at it like that, because MVP is in every sport, it's such a tough. Everyone has like a different criteria and a different like way to grade it, but like Patrick Mahomes didn't have his best season. If you take Patrick Mahomes off the Kansas City Chiefs, they're definitely not making the playoffs.
True.
So it's
100%.
It's so tough to find a specific criteria to go off of. It's just like it's such a difficult thing to do. So that's why, I mean, I think it could have gone so many different directions.
Same thing. Yeah. And that always gets the brain going. Like, yeah, you take Tyreek off Miami, and Tua doesn't even have close to 4,000 yards. Exactly. You know what I mean? Not just because, almost, 1,900 or 1,800 of them went to Tyreek. I'm not saying it just because that, but it's just, it's the whole players or on that team and what they bring with defense, how they play against them, offense, defense, everything,
100%.
But yeah, it is a very hard award to assess. 100%.
Totally. And let's totally. And we're going to jump right into the next topic because we have a big conversation ahead of us here. The 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs will be going against each other for the second time in the Super Bowl in 2 days. 2 days, dude. And it's sneaking up on us, and it's coming around the corner so fast. And this is going to be such a good game. And I don't know where to go with this. Like, I have so many emotions and so many feelings about how this game is going to go, but I want to hear your just initial thoughts and how you think the Super Bowl is going to go, who you think is going to win. What's it look like for you on Sunday?
I mean, initial thoughts. I mean, it's just running to the left with 23 and 71, setting the blocks, and then getting those play actions across the field to either 85 or 11, man, and then throwing the ball out wide to Debo. That's our offense, in my opinion, is because we have those players where, even though it's so predictable, the year that all of those guys have had, of course with Purdy, that we're still going to be able to get away with it, in my opinion. Defense-wise, I think we are extremely set up for this game for Mahomes, in my opinion, because this is Mahomes, 4 years later? It's not 2019, 2020 anymore. That guy's not running as much as he is. Still going to run for at least 3 to 4 first downs. not going to be too happy, but I'm expecting that, kind of like what Lamar did with us. But just with this 49er team, it's what we talked about in preseason. It was a Super Bowl or bust team with all the people we have, and we did our job getting to this moment. They did their job. We did our job. They did their job getting to that. You know what I mean? And we just have to execute. I think with how these teams are matched up, I think 100% it is the 49ers game to lose. 100%. I think that we are a massive favorite. And we play like we played against, I want to say, LA in the second half in week 4 or whatever that was. It's a second half team. I know we were talking about it, that we can't be a second half team, but it's coming out, and you just take what the defense gets you, get the checkdowns. Who gives a shit? You know what I mean? And run the football. Just give it to your playmakers, man. That's all we got to do. Seriously. It's, of course, way easier said than done, but I think we have a phenomenal chance against this team. You know what I mean? But it's going to be a shootout, 100%. I really don't see this game. I don't see anybody winning more than 7. I think it's going to be a very close game.
I think it's going to be a close game too. I'm not going to say we have a phenomenal chance, but I mean, obviously we have a chance, but phenomenal is a little too far for me. Like we were on the phone the other day, and I'm going to bring up a couple points that we talked about. First off, if the 49ers play like they played in the playoffs, they will lose this game. They will lose against the Chiefs if they play like they did against Green Bay, and if they played like they did in the first half against Detroit. They're going to lose. And that is why I don't have a ton of confidence. The 49ers are not playing their best football coming into the Super Bowl. They're playing their second worst stretch of football of the season outside of that three-game skid in the middle of the regular season. This is some of the worst football we've seen from them this season. They should have lost to the Packers. I mean, that Packers game, they got bailed out. Kyle got bailed out in the end. Kyle was terrible against the Packers. Should have lost that game, and we should have lost to Detroit. If Dan Campbell went for a touchdown at the end of the first half, that game is over. They're going to get that. I mean, okay, I guess you never know. Anything can happen in a football game, but I'm going to say the chances are in their favor to score right there. This game is over, and we would have lost going into the half down 24 instead of 17. I don't think the 49ers are playing good enough football right now for me to think we have a phenomenal chance at win. We have a chance. We have a chance because we're here. But no way is it a phenomenal chance, because they aren't giving me a reason to believe that we're walking into this game and we're just going to kick some butt, when in reality, we should have been out of the playoffs 3 weeks ago.
See, that's crazy, Hernandez, because look at it, okay? I get it. Any given Sunday when we played on Saturday versus Green Bay, but you got to look at it. I'm not disagreeing with you that those games were not the best, 100%. In a lot of aspects, they were bad, horrible in others. But that's the thing. It's playoff time. Look what happened. And when we were playing horrible football, we stepped up when we needed to. Our quarterback stepped up when he needed to. Our defense went berserk against Detroit. Absolutely berserk. Now, there was at least 2 times minimum where Dan Campbell should have kicked a field goal. I understand that. But guess what? Pat McAfee was saying, where you live by the sword, you die by the sword. That's what got them there, was going for it. It was going for it, trying to push the ball, get him upfield, and just bleed that clock, get 7 on the board, or get a chip shot 3, even though they were kind of already in chip shot range. So I understand what you're saying, where you don't have as much confidence as I do because of the pure game film and what we were playing like versus both of those teams. I understand that. But I just think with this team, the culture of this team right now, how the defense is set up, even though defense has been very sketchy, the play calls have been very sketchy in the playoffs and even in the last couple of weeks. I just think that this team, this is the best team we'll see, I think, in our generation. And I don't think that's a bad take at all. And that's just kind of why this confidence is it's at a new level where I'm really expecting them to do it. Now, 2019, we were kind of talking the same way, because we had a very similar team in 2019. I get it. Much different quarterback, much different running back, different line for the most part, better, worse. Same thing with D-line. Secondary, sure. But this is the team. And I think they're going to show that. I know they're going to show that. This is the 49ers. This is the team that's going to do it. We got a revenge tour. We got a guy we know. We got a guy we know. You know what I mean? In 15 on the opposing side, we know what he's going to do. We know who he's going to throw to.
That doesn't matter, though. I mean, it doesn't matter if we know. Listen, I think that this is the best team the 49ers have had. And that this is the best team the Niners have had. I wasn't alive in the 90s, and I know they stacked up a couple of those seasons, but I mean, we might, roster-wise, it might be pretty close in how good this team is, right? So like you said, we're not going to see a better team than we have right now. That being said, why are we not playing like that? Why are we not playing like the best team, like the best roster in the history of the 49ers franchise? We're not. We're just flat out, we are not playing that way, which is what scares me when you might be able to get away with that against the Packers and a young Jordan Love who's making his first playoff appearance. And you might be able to get away with that against Dan Campbell's Lions, who Dan Campbell just gets way too aggressive and doesn't know how to. You might be able to get away with it. You think you're going to get away with that against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce? It's not going to fly as easy as
happened. Not saying that it's going to unfold like that. It's just, now look, 100%. We haven't been playing this way because there's been certain play calls, dude, and you know that better than anybody else on the offense and defense. 100% more so on offense than defense in versus the Packers. Packers was the worst offensive play calling I've ever seen in my life, and I rarely say that about with coaching and this and that. But it's just I see what you're saying, where we can't play the way we played in both of these games, because if we do, we're going to lose by 50. I'm not arguing that. I'm not. But but guess what? We got another 2 more days to prepare, really a day. But also they've had a week of pure film getting prepared for this guy. If not a week and a half. You know what I mean? I'm not saying they took the whole 2 weeks. These guys are just ready to get to Mahomes. Dude, you disrupt 15, game over. Later.
See,
right here.
A lot easier said than done.
I get it, but guess what? You disrupt that guy, game over. I don't care about okay, Pachenko, he's nice. Okay, I forgot about number 10.
Listen, we had the same situation in 2019. We had 2 weeks to prepare for this guy and watch the film on the MVP.
Okay, we had
NFL.
Number 10. We had 10.
True. Very true.
You're right.
You're right. That's true. I agree. We had Kyle though. And Kyle, and so, okay. But listen, dude, I'm not judging. All I'm saying is I think your confidence is just a little too high. It's just higher than mine right now, just because if we were running through teams, if we were playing like we were playing in the beginning of the season, I'd be right there with you, dude. I'd be right there with you, because this team, I know it. I know how talented this roster is, and I'd be right there saying we are the best team in the league and we can take down Kansas City, but we're not playing like that. Again, if we play like we have, listen, against the Lions, against the Packers, and you could even go back to against the Rams in Week 18. I know they did not look good. I know it was some backups started to get in there, but we did not look good against the Rams in Week 18. If we play like that, any of those 3 games, we will lose. 100%. We are not going to win. We have to turn it around somehow, and I'm just hoping that they can.
Well, you hope, and they did versus Detroit. Dude,
in the second half, sure, but
I get it. You can't be a second half team. I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking for that at all. But what can we judge after the last 15 minutes that were played, or last 30 minutes that were played in the last game they did? They absolutely balled out on both sides of the ball. They balled out.
Yeah,
they played.
They did.
That was 49er football.
But what'd they do for the first 30 minutes? And I know you brought that up, but I'm just saying you can't do that against Kansas City.
Our defense got ran through. Literally got ran through.
Exactly, right? And you can't do that against Kansas. But I'm saying
because,
this though.
You're not facing Goff, even though I love
exactly.
Goff.
I know I'm
facing first ballot Mahomes. I got you.
I'm a Goff guy. I'm a Goff guy too. I'm with Jared Goff. I think he's good. But listen, when you look at when you're playing against Patrick Mahomes, you're playing against Andy Reid. You're playing against the 2-time Super Bowl champions, the guys who have won 2 Super Bowls in the past 4 years. One of them against us. You're not going against the Detroit Lions, who made their first conference championship in the past 50 years. It's a different team. And if you want to go down a 17-point hole in the first half, pack your bags at halftime and fly back to Santa Clara because you're not going to win that game against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs.
Hey, well, that's all right because that ain't going to happen. It's just not.
I
It's not.
I hope it's not.
Oh, it's not because we're going to run to the left with 2-3 and we're going to throw the ball to 85 and let him go to work. Okay?
Listen,
That's what we're going to do.
I like that. And I think this is my kind of game plan for the 49ers here is what I think they should really be focusing on is running the football. My two X factors, run the football, get pressure on Mahomes. That's what you have to do.
Yeah.
And I think Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey should get a combined 30 carries. I think they should get a combined 30 carries. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think you got to run it down their throats. I think that's what's going to be the recipe to win the game. McCaffrey and Deebo should get 30 carries
so what,
in this game.
Deebo to like 10? You want Deebo to get 10?
McCaffrey's got to get like 24, maybe 6.
Yeah.
You got this is a Super Bowl, man. You got to.
Right,
I mean, it's not. What are we saving them for, right? It's like now.
No, I understand that. I understand that.
I think you got to get those guys a ton of carries, and then you got to get pressure on Mahomes because we didn't get much pressure. We didn't sack Jordan Love once, right?
No,
we didn't get much pressure on Jordan Love.
Absolutely balled out. We got pressure on that guy 6 times out of the 50 snaps, and 5 of the times we got pressure on him, he evaded and threw dots. I mean, he balled out.
Well, Mahomes is going to do the same thing, but you just got to get pressure. You got to just, regardless of what the quarterback's going to do with
this D-line.
You're making it tougher on the quarterback when you apply the pressure. And like you just said, with the defensive line, we have invested so much into our front 7. We have so much invested in our front 7, and we should be getting more pressure than we actually do get.
I mean, 100%. Let's look at Tampa Bay versus KC. That game was extremely boring in the second half because all we were watching was Mahomes run around because of his O-line. I'm pretty sure they were missing a tackle. Am I correct? Or 2?
I think
something.
So. Yeah.
I think it was 2, at least 1. I remember that, and I was like, all right, that's kind of tough for you to lose. I mean, O-line is extremely vital point in football. That doesn't get talked about enough, but then also sometimes does. But I think 100%. Just it's what you're saying. Flush the quarterback, run that football. You know what I mean? You know, if we're able to get him off his back foot, he's got to get out of the pocket. If he gets out of the pocket and makes a pass, good for him. But what we can't do is let him get a bunch of these 7-step dropbacks, just like they don't want Purdy to drop back. Nobody wants any quarterback to. You know what I mean? On the opposing team. So I just think, though, too, why I'm still very confident, even though our D-line has been very shaky as well, too. And for almost the entire year, they've been underdeveloped on paper-wise. On paper, this team should lead the league by sacks by 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially with the pickup of Chase Young. But I know with our pressures and our coverage, I understand that. But I think going into certain players where Fred Warner is right now, he's in his prime. He's having the best year of his life. Ward having the best year of his life. Greenlaw, it's just smash mouth defense, even though that's not even a thing. You just swarm them. You know what I mean? So I'm very confident in that. Biggest thing we got to what Niners got to worry about too is 10. You know what I mean? Yeah. Pacheco's top 5. He's proven that this year, the way that guy can run, and his stats, it backs it up. You know, so they got some big threats. They got some really big weapons on that team, and of course that's known. But it's going to be really, really exciting, really fun. But like I said, I think it's going to be a shootout. I think I don't know the score yet, but it's going to be a big one.
I think we're going to need to see a lot of adjustments made from Kyle Shanahan and from Steve Wilks. I think those two guys have kind of been the dumb and dumber of the 49ers playoff run so far. They both need to figure some things out because I've said 50 different times in this episode, you cannot play like you did against Detroit and then against Green Bay. You just can't. Second half, Detroit's different, but you can't go down that much in the first half. It's a 60-minute football game.
I mean, second half Detroit, nobody's touching that team. Just like second half or first half KC or a certain game that Green Bay had. I get it. It's momentum. 100% it was momentum. You don't get that catch with Brandon Ayuk without momentum. You don't get that fumble by Gibbs without momentum. I get it. The play, both of those plays, a player made a great play for that to happen. I understand that, but momentum is a real thing. So that was a huge factor that we were home, a huge factor where the ball, fell literally just right there. We got it out. Whatever. But what I'm happy about is, like I was saying, these guys have had 2 weeks, a true week and a half to prepare for one team, one coach, one quarterback, one running back. Same on the other, same with KC. They've had plenty of time to prepare for
Oh
us.
yeah.
But man, I'm just really pumped. It's the team. That's all I'm gonna say. This is the team.
This is the team. I agree. I think if you don't win it with this team, you're never going to win it. I think if you don't win it,
Unfortunately, that's a fact.
if you don't win it, if you don't win your 6th Super Bowl this year on Sunday, that puts Kyle Shanahan on the hot seat. Well, it won't put Kyle Shanahan on the hot seat, but it should.
Oh no,
And
yeah, no.
it's
Unfortunately, it would. That's not gonna happen.
and
But if it
I
does,
think Kyle,
I mean, he's
I
gone.
think he should. Well, okay. I think Kyle Shanahan. You know my general opinions on Shanahan. I think for the most part, not counting the playoffs, Kyle Shanahan was kind of in his bag in this regular season. Outside of the 3-game skid, there were some questionable things going on in there. Kyle Shanahan, I think, had this offense looking great. Now, playoffs rolled around, and against Green Bay, he tried his hardest to make us lose that game, which is what he does best in the playoffs. But that's why I'm just saying, like, I think Kyle Shanahan, this is your year, dude. This is kind of like, this is the year for you to finally get over the hump, because everyone wants to tell me that this guy is this greatest coach, offensive mind in the history of the entirety of the world, and yet he has not even had one Super Bowl, and he's been to these stages so many times, and he's just lost it. So I think that this is his season to do it. If he doesn't do it, his seat should be getting very warm. We should be turning on the seat warmers for this guy, because his seat needs to get hot, and then that could be the end. I mean, it just shows that he's not able to do. What more do you want? That's all I'd ask him. I'd say, hey man, what more do you want?
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. Very, very genuinely. What more do you want, Kyle? Seriously, and what more would you need? You wouldn't need anything else besides Tom Brady. That's the only thing this team. That's it. That's the only thing you can really ask for with any team. But I get that, but it's all right. It's all right, because when we get out of this with 58 Super Bowl.
Yeah, I hope so. Okay, so let's hear it. Let's hear your final prediction. I mean, what do you got for the Super Bowl?
I mean, I got Bang Bang Niner gang, baby. I got Mr. Irrelevant holding up the Lombardi and proving everybody wrong.
Super Bowl MVP?
I haven't really thought about McCaffrey's gonna have 160 with 2, you know what I mean, and he's gonna have like 50 receiving yards with like 8 catches. You know what I mean? He's just gonna, and I'm gonna be fine with that. You know what I mean?
Niners now, by how much?
I don't know yet. I don't know. Okay, Niners. No, Niners. Let's see the real score. Real score. Bro, honestly, like 31-27, dude. I just see it as, I know a lot of people have Super Bowls like that where it's like right at the spread or right at the over-under or like really close kind of game where that's high scoring. 31-27 is very high scoring for a Super Bowl, in my opinion. Just especially with both of those defenses. But what you will see is Patrick Mahomes is going to throw the ball over 34 times. He is going to have about 315 yards. He's going to have 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, with a completion rate of 60
picks.
He's going to have 2 picks. One by Gibson Jr., Jr., and a toss up to Brown or Warner. Heard it here first.
Patrick Mahomes will not have 2 interceptions, unless there's a tip ball off the hands of Kadarius Toney.
Pick.
Yeah, it's a pick. Okay, I guess
not going in the game. 19 is not touching the grass, dude.
Patrick Mahomes will not have 2 interceptions that are both his fault. I'll say that. Our defense won't be doing.
He'll have one. He will have one, 100%.
Maybe one, but definitely not 2. But again, listen, I gotta give a prediction here, and I'm being honest. I gotta be objective here. I gotta take out the bias, and I gotta go Chiefs by 3. If I was a betting man, I think that's how this game. Dude,
why am I looking at you right now, dude? Why am I on your screen? What are we doing?
Listen, dude. That's just, I gotta call it how it is. What do you want me to say? The Niners are gonna win every single game. That's what I don't like about this fan base. Listen. All I'm saying is I'm not rooting for Chiefs by 3. That's not what I'm rooting for. I'm rooting for Niners by 50. But if I gotta put money on it and I gotta put out a prediction, I gotta go Chiefs by 3. You know why? I'll tell
Why?
you why. I mean, I've told you why a little bit, but I'll just say this. They've got the best of us before. They've got guys who actually know what it takes to win a Super Bowl. We got a bunch of
No,
I
true.
was gonna say clowns, but I'm not gonna say clowns
Hey,
unless
whoa,
you
whoa.
go,
No,
you
I
can
get it.
call,
KC
you can
KC
call
has
Kyle a clown.
70% or 80% of that team, at least 70% has been on that Super Bowl team. I'm imagining. You know what I mean? Of
They
course, or
they
sorry, I should say at least 50% of those guys know exactly what it takes. And I think 50% also knows what it's like to have 2 Super Bowl rings. So that's a huge factor. You know what I mean? That's like the
I told
Warriors,
exactly.
with you know what I mean? And I know that's being talked about experience and how we're still I mean, we're not a young team, definitely not compared to other teams in the league, but with Super Bowl experience, we are very young compared to KC, which is
We are
a
exactly. I think
huge, huge. It's in huge favor of Kansas City.
Yeah, I think that's going to play a part in it for sure. And I mean, like I said, man, Kansas City got the best of us once before, got the best of Kyle. Kyle flustered. Again, we have a different quarterback, which is a huge thing as well. We have a quarterback who's actually, competent enough to win a Super Bowl potentially. Like I believe that Brock Purdy, I mean, what I've seen from Brock Purdy, I believe that he could win this game on Sunday, right? Um,
Mhm.
So also I've seen some bad things from Brock Purdy. I've seen some stinkers from Brock Purdy, right? He hasn't been phenomenal in the playoffs himself, right? He's come through a couple times when it mattered though. This isn't about that. All I'm saying is that looking at these teams here and looking at how they're playing, if I was a betting man, give me Kansas City by 3. But as a 49er fan, I hope I'm wrong. I pray that I'm wrong here, but that's just where I have to lean because of this 49er team is not playing like the best assembled roster in the NFL. They're just not. And if they were, it'd be you'd hear a different prediction coming out of my mouth.
So you have KC by 3. Okay, so I got SF by 45. Okay,
If
here's our take.
okay, I like. Well, again, listen, I'm more for the objectivity than the bias. But listen, all I'll say is this: if the 49ers win, I think the easy choice, I mean, it's Purdy or McCaffrey, but I really feel like we're going to have a good Debo game, and he'd be a guy for the Super Bowl MVP. I
Yeah,
feel
that
like
would be
Debo's
insane. 19 Super Bowl MVP.
would be
That's
pretty fire.
insane.
It would be.
That's
Listen,
insane.
man.
I mean, he would see, but that's the thing is like for a receiver to get that. I mean, like an Edelman, where it's a very low scoring game and he just has these catches. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like an Edelman game, but I don't see that happening. I think the ball would go to Ayuk in those
Valid.
scenarios. You know what I mean?
Uh huh.
Or
Mm-hmm.
8-5. I'm fine with
Mm-hmm.
Debo, whatever. But for Debo to get that MVP nod, I think he would have to have, of course, at least a receiving tutty, 10 plus, and about 130, and Purdy to only have 1 or 2 passing. You know what I mean? And same thing.
Yeah.
It would be, I think, odds wise, let's just say like Brock Purdy and Mahomes are both plus 350s. I think that would mean Debo has to be like a plus 950 or a plus
Yeah.
1100, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Just because
Yeah.
then you have guys like Pacheco, you have guys like McCaffrey. You know what I mean? Even, defense wise, like Warner, you would have to go. I mean, you just have to absolutely go berserk for you to be a
You
defensive
would.
guy to get it.
Uh-huh.
That would be the coolest thing ever. That would
It would be.
okay. Like betting wise, I go McCaffrey.
Mm-hmm.
And let's go for the other betting guy. Other betting, KC Mahomes. Now, for fun, 100%, I would love it. The best outcome ever. We win by a field goal. We win by 1. We win by 50, and Fred Warner gets Super Bowl MVP. That would be the coolest thing ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would
That would
like
be
that.
my number one. If I could just give it to a guy and just pick it out, and I had that power, it'd go to 54, dude. I mean, he's
I
insane.
love
That'd be
Fred's
very
the
cool.
jersey. He's the jersey I rep now in the playoffs. I mean, we've been winning with it, so I got that 5-4
There
on
you
my
go.
back, dude, and I've
There
been
you
loving
go.
it. So, well, Owen, dude, right on. Some good conversation here. I really appreciate it. We're gonna go ahead and wrap up. Everybody out there listening, I appreciate you tuning into the show. You can find us on social media on Instagram at the nightshift.pod, on TikTok at the Night Shift Pod, and on Twitter at the Night Shift. 2 T's at the beginning, 2 T's at the end. We just started putting episodes on YouTube, so this will be the 3rd episode going on YouTube. You can find that at the Night Shift Pod on there. I have a link to everything in the description of the YouTube video, so you can see that down there if you're watching on YouTube. I got the links in the bios on all social platforms. You can find it there. You can find where to listen. We're available Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much Anywhere you want to listen to something, you can find us there. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. Oh, and again, appreciate you coming on, man. It's going to be a good game Sunday.
Yes, sir. Thank you, brother. Can't wait to, call you up halftime when we're up by probably 30. You know what I mean?
I hope so, dude. I hope that's the
Knock on
case.
wood.
I hope so, dude. Well, right on again. Appreciate you coming on. And everybody out there listening, thank you again. And that'll be it for me. I'm out. Peace.